Okay, so do you remember in the last video when I said sometimes you just have to do it, as they say? So I finally sat down and tried to do some sewing. I wanted to tackle the skirt for a little bit just because it's only, 4 panels and a little trimming piece where the dress closes in the front. Just to try to tackle an easy part of it and get that little endorphin rush of completeness and maybe actually finishing something. And it finally, looking at it and realizing that I was going to make mistakes on it, I was gonna have to get out the handy seam ripper. The instructions tell you to use a lap seam. And then I had the basic understanding of what a lap seam is. I didn't see it in the other garments I had made before. I don't know if it's an antiquated seam necessarily, but it just wasn't one I'd actually done. But I'd seen it in some of the older sewing manuals. And it's kind of counterintuitive because we're so used to doing seams on the inside, basically put the right sides of the fabric together, sew it, fold it out. The lap seam is done from the outside on the right side, if that makes any sense. So there's this little trim piece. So this would be the front of the skirt. I think this is where you would actually put the buttons as it closes over when it wraps around. This seam is done from the outside, so done from the right side of it. So when you fold this down, there will be this nice little seam on the outside, and this will lay flat. And I needed to do it wrong to see the right way to do it. I'm so bad about looking at this as you have to do it right the first time. That's why we do mock-ups, period. You're going to make mistakes. It helps you understand how the pattern works. And it was literally as simple as doing it wrong and looking at what it looked like wrong to see how to do it right. So breakthrough, those are always fun. Sewing breakthroughs are great. So I am going to rip out the seam. I'm going to do how I think is the correct way, tackle the rest of the skirt, see if I could at least get it constructed. There's still a lot of sizing that I need to do on the bodice. I don't think I'm going to need to do much sizing on the skirt because, again, my waist measurements are a little bit... My waist measurements tend to be a little bit easier to deal with. And if anything, for example, on the last dress I made, I had to size down the waist because it was out of proportion from what the pattern size was for the bust and for the hips. So I'm hoping with this, since the bust was a little bit smaller, that the waist would be a little bit more in proportion. And again, as I said last time, going on the assumption that in that era, this would have still been worn over a corset. I don't have a corset yet, so I would just be wearing this over normal 21st century undergarments. So I'm hoping that the waist will be good. Once I get this put together, then I can look at tackling the bodice. I've been doing some research on pattern grading, on how to grade the bodice pieces up. It'll get confusing because when I tried on the mock-up that I had made of the bodice, the back piece seemed like it would fit. It's really just going to be that front piece that crosses over that's going to have to be enlarged. So we'll see. Going to try to finish the skirt first and then go from there. this is what the little front trim should look like with that little lap seam. There's still this little bit in the corner that I'm not 100% sure how you're supposed to fold that in and make it look nice. But that's what it's supposed to look like for the most part. I'm still not sure about the purpose of doing these lap seams on all of the skirt gores. I was able to kind of fiddle with it and get, so this would be one of the side gores. It looks nice. Ideally, unless you wanted to make an aesthetic choice and use a different thread that wouldn't be visible, I plan to just use black thread on my black material, so you're probably not going to see it. I still want to do more research on if this was just a common way they did seams. I'm going to, I think, just do a regular seam along the center back because it is literally just a flat, straight seam. But I'm still playing around with that. The only bit now I'm a little confused about is on the edges of the gores. It does this little bit where it has this piece that sticks out from, not the easiest way to do this. So it has this little piece that sticks out, but this is supposed to be just the flat edge of the side. My theory is that since this is supposed to be a hobble dress and is supposed to be very slim at the bottom, that you're actually supposed to maybe tuck those pieces in as you make the side seam so it slims out the bottom of the skirt a little bit. I'm still not 100% sure about that, but I'm really happy that I figured out that trim piece because there's a similar piece on the top. So this, you're sewing it together as two pieces, but when you sew the bodice to the skirt, this should almost look like one single line of trim, even though you've put them on separately. You've put the trim on the skirt and you've put the trim on the bodice. I'm still not sure about eventual finishing of the edge seams. Do you just turn it under? Like I said in the last video, this says that this is not lined. Obviously, they would have all of their undergarments, so it's not like you were seeing through anything, but it still seems like you would have this weird raw edge that I'm not sure what you're supposed to do with. So as we continue our experimentation and not being scared about making mistakes on the mock-up material, that you can seam rip and move on. And then the front gores, you don't attach the front gores to each other. It crosses over and you button it on this back piece. So it'll button there. Internally in the waistband, you'll have an internal waistband which will then hook, which you won't see from the outside, and then you've got more buttons here. It does say something about putting in a placket, so if there was any, pieces moved around as you're wearing it, you wouldn't be showing anything unmentionable underneath it, just like skirt plackets. If you don't have a zipper and it just crosses over and buttons, you have extra material there, so if there was anything peeking through, you would just see material. So I need to experiment a little bit more with how those pieces all go together. So once I get the skirt together, then I can look back at the bodice. I think that'll be a later video. The sewing time is finishing today. That was about as much mental power as I could do. But success with figuring out a small piece, even if it's just a small piece, it puts you in the right direction and it puts you in, I think, a better state of mind. So you go into the next sewing session feeling confident rather than just feeling defeated again, because that's how I was feeling really, really badly with this. Yeah, the lap seam. I don't know. I don't know. I wish I understood that. This would be done if this was just modern, seam it up, open the seams, and be done with it. This would have been finished already. But just trying to figure out these lap seams was confusing. And it's hard when you're trying to maneuver now all of this fabric with the skirt. So we'll explore the bodice next time and look at some pattern grading and try to size this up. So till next time.